Save on O'Reilly Brake Parts Cleaner. Get 2 cans of O'Reilly Brake Parts Cleaner for just $8. Valid in-store only at O'Reilly Auto Parts.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
This is the CRM Archaeology Podcast. It's the show where we pull back the veil of cultural resources management, archaeology, and discuss the issues that everyone is concerned about. Welcome to the podcast. Hello and welcome to the CRM Archaeology Podcast, episode 273 for September 20th, 2023. I'm your host, Chris Webster. On today's show, we talk about burning down the existing conference and archaeological society structure. So get ready to join a committee because the CRM Archaeology Podcast starts right now. Welcome to the show, everyone. Joining me today is Andrew in California on video.
Hey, everybody. How's it going? Coming to you live.
And then Doug over in Scotland.
Hey, everyone.
All right. So first off, I got to say, because I just saw this a few days ago, we got to give an in memoriam message here. RIP archaeologyfieldwork.com. Jennifer Palmer has decided to close down the site. My wife was saying she thought she saw that last year too. Maybe she tried this once before and just didn't work, didn't take. But she's been doing this for no money. She's never charged to put something on there. She's basically, done all the work herself. And she's got some tools and some bots and stuff that bring in jobs from like USA Jobs and things like that, I believe. But otherwise, she's put a lot of work into this thing over the past, since 1996, I think, is what it says on the website. So,
Jesus, I remember there's a little thing. I thought it was like 98 or something, but yeah, that's
late 90s sometime. Yeah, I know that. Yeah. But that's just phenomenal. And she needs some kind of an award for that because so many people in this field have gotten jobs off of that website. And for some reason, I think it's just the name Shovel Bums seems to be more, I don't know, more well known as a word just because of the word shovel bum. I mean, Arjo Brandon really named it well because of that.
He's done like a lot because, that's his job. So like Jennifer, as far as I know, never charged ever. No. It costs her, not a lot of money for hosting, but, I remember at years ago, she'd have to go back and like erase stuff because she would run out of memory on her hosting just to be able to post new jobs and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And so, it's costing her probably, a couple hundred a year or something like that to just not including like her time, which I don't even know how many like 100K, hundreds of thousands of dollars of time she's put into that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But like, so like, Arjo, he really has pushed shovel bums a lot. Whereas Jennifer, I mean, I'm not sure she's ever advertised, like as like pushed out the website as something that, other than, I mean, she did social media like Twitter and Facebook and groups and stuff like that. But I've never actually seen her go into another group and be like, oh, hey, this is a service. Yeah. It's all been like organic where someone's like, did you know?
Yeah, totally. And I just, I really wish somebody could like take over the reins of that, to be honest with you, and keep that thing going. But does it take a dedicated following? And if not, it would be nice maybe if like everybody that I guess follows archaeology fieldwork on different places, if they could just suck them up into shovel bums or something like that, so you don't lose that audience. But if that's not possible, then yeah, it sucks. It's nice to have competition. Nothing against Arjo Brandon. I've talked to him lots of times at different conferences, and he's a cool guy. And like you said, he does do shovel bums as a business, which again, to keep this thing going, I mean, you gotta have a buy-in, right? So like, it's hard to do with a day job. So I totally understand him charging for stuff and wanting to make that his life's work, basically. But that is another thing too. Like, eventually he's going to stop doing it. And does he have employees? Is there anybody poised to take the reins? Can somebody buy shovel bums? It's a business. It's a little scary for our field that we're going to have to rely on, Facebook as job posting if shovel bums dies too. You know what I mean? Anyway. All right. Well, speaking of, things that should die sometimes, let's talk about let's talk about all those archaeological societies and organizations and things out there that we all know we're all told to join, and at multiple levels, from the lowest level sometimes being the state, or even regionally within the state if you've got a large state that you live in and work in primarily, and then up to regional and sometimes definitely national associations, depending on what your preference is for archaeology and what you do. So and then stuff like RPA, right? Things like that are these things effective? Do they do anything? Doug, you brought this topic up. What more do you have to say to introduce this for us?
Well, we're going to put this in the links, show notes. You guys are going to have to go read this. What somewhat inspired this topic was now it's the Homeland, Office of Homeland, whatever. There's an old archived book for them, the precursor to the CIA. And it's a book on how to sabotage. It was meant for World War II, meant to be like a guide to drop into, I assume, occupied France or, parts of Germany. I mean, it's all in English, so I'm not sure exactly who the audience was. I assume at some point they probably translated it. It's a wonderful little guide on how to sabotage different industry or organizations or processes in a country to slow down, well, at this time, the Nazis. But there's a section, and there's a section that literally is organizations and conferences. And I just you start reading some of these things, and man, it's deja vu of a lot of what we see occur in archaeology. I mean, just thinking the very first number one is insist on doing everything through channels, and that's in quotes. Never permit shortcuts to be taken in order to expedite decisions. It's just man, I've seen that many a time where things are meant to happen and people are like, whoa, we need to slow down. This needs to go to an AGM, which is 11 months away. And it's just you start reading through a lot of these things, how to sabotage organizations and meetings, and it's a bit eerie. And so that's how I came up with the topic. Is it's something, a lot of these tactics I've seen happen over the different years in archaeology, and a lot of them happen in organizations and professional organizations as well. And I think there's a reason for that. But before we jump into that, I was going to say, have you guys had a chance to read it? And do you have a picture, a favorite one in terms of how do you prefer to sabotage initiatives? I think I'm going to try to find the number. One of my favorites. Oh, well, I actually have two. One is refer back to previous meeting minutes and reopen everything that was done over that 2 hours that you'd seen in a previous meeting. That's one of my favorite ones. I've seen that happen many a time. Attempt to re-drag something that was already made a decision on. And then there's another one where it's oh yeah, when possible, refer all matters to committees for further study and consideration, in quotes. Attempt to make the committees as large as possible, never less than 5. And I've seen that happen a lot as well, where there'll be an incident and they'll be oh, we need a committee. And so you guys have probably just heard my daughter yell through the speaker there. Hey, Kato, hold on. I'm in the middle of a podcast. Okay. Well,
we have a special guest today.
I'll end my conversation so she can.
I believe, Doug, I believe your daughter is sabotaging your podcast, so she obviously read the guide.
Yeah. I do. I can't remember if you said this one, Doug, because I was pulling it up as you were saying it, but bring up irrelevant issues as frequently as possible. I really like that one. Yeah. Haggle over precise wordings of communications, minutes, and resolutions. I don't know how many things I've been in where somebody's like, can we reword this? There's a comma out of place. Get out of here. Actually, get out of here. Man.
Sorry, guys. I'll add in there. One they didn't include was have a toddler. Include a toddler in your meeting.
Exactly.
Right. Nice.
Amazing. You know how much quicker World War II would have ended if they just dropped toddlers on D-Day? It would have just been over in a weekend.
I know. Total chaos. Total chaos. Oh man.
The list of stuff when you look at that publication, and it's published in I think like January 1944 or something. Like it's really, really interesting. It's a long list of depression for any of us who's been, in this world. You can basically tick all of them. I love that Doug brought this, because I would recommend anyone who's been in these kind of meetings, which is honestly most of us, download this thing, dude. Download this thing, read it through, or even bring it to the meeting, like on your computer or on your phone, and like check them off as you have to sit through those awful meetings. Like, it would be hilarious. And you realize you're checking off a document from World War II designed to sabotage. Like,
one of these here is directly out of the leadership playbook for CRM, and it's never pass on your skill and experience to a new or less skillful worker.
Yeah. Oh my. So just.
Yeah.
It kills me. That one's perfect. I even see that one. I'm like looking at the list. I'm like, there's the skill set.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we haven't even got to like that. That was just like the conferences and organizations. I even got to like if you're a worker, or if you're a manager. I do feel like the manager one hits a little too close to home.
Yeah. Oh man, we want to bring up, I think we're going to go to break and we'll talk about this more in depth in segment 2, but I want to bring up what is the reason for these conferences and organizations and societies that we have, and is the reason they were started still valid, and how can we maybe, what would we want to see in something like this in the future going forward for the modern society that we live in? We'll talk about that on the other side of the break. Back in a minute.
Is your vehicle stopping like it should? Does it squeal or grind when you brake? Don't miss out on summer brake deals at O'Reilly Auto Parts.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Save on O'Reilly Brake Parts Cleaner. Get 2 cans of O'Reilly Brake Parts Cleaner for just $8. Valid in-store only at O'Reilly Auto Parts.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
If you're a facilities manager at a warehouse and your HVAC system goes down, it can turn up the heat, literally. But don't sweat it, Grainger has you covered. Grainger offers over 1 million industrial-grade products for all your operations, including warehouse HVAC maintenance. And even better, they offer access to experts and fast delivery, so you and your warehouse can both keep your cool. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Welcome back to episode 273 of the CRM Archaeology podcast. And we are talking about societies and conferences and things like that. And I don't know, correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe you guys know this better than I do, because I literally did no research on this. But is the reason... I think the reason for things like the SAA is, and especially regional conferences and things like that, is because back in the day, and I'm talking like probably 50s and 60s, give or take, earlier in some cases for some of these conferences out there, but around that time frame, there just wasn't an easy way for educators, because it was mostly academics. There wasn't an easy way for them to get together and collaborate. There wasn't an internet, they had journals and things like that. And journals are another story, but they had no real easy way to just get together and share information and see their colleagues and, do that kind of thing. So it made sense that everybody would physically come together in a space, once or maybe even twice a year and just present research, discuss it, have that thing. And then also, as a vehicle for publishing as well, because a lot of these bigger conferences, they have their own journals, right? And that's what I say, probably most of their money's going to, aside from the conference itself, which is usually like $1 million for like the SAAs. But, aside from that, the other big expense that they probably have is the journal, if I had to guess, just because publishing and all that. But and that there's some value there, but I feel like the conferences have gone way off the rails for their original intent, because there's little chance to even talk to the people who are presenting papers, because they're just slamming them through. They're always late. The SAAs has 50 concurrent sessions going on at any one point in time, so you can't even see everything that you want to see. They try to put stuff in tracks, so if you're interested in one thing, it's not overlapping with a similar thing, right? They try to do that, but it's really hard when you've got so many presentations, and I feel like we'd get a lot more more value out of the SAA if they limited it like they do American Antiquity. There's only so many articles they can put into each issue. And I feel like if they just limited it and had more time, which is honestly was the idea behind the Cultural Share events that we're doing. It's just 3 presenters. It's about 2 hours. They get a lot of time. We get a short amount of time to present and a lot of time for discussion and questions and things like that to really share and discuss the data and figure out what's going on there. So that's the reason behind that. But what do you guys think? Am I right on the reason how they started and, the fact that they need to change?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the reason they started. And I think there's a conflict with most all of these societies that occur, which is like, especially when you get like the big ones, if it's not very, very, if you don't have a very, very narrow remit, and like a lot of the big ones are meant to be all encompassing. There's this huge conflict of like, they want to be involved in everything. Mm-hmm. But once you kind of become like a everything for everyone, you, instead of having like an external conflict where, you need to hash it out with a different group. And like, if you were to think of like, a lot of advocacy stuff, like where you have different groups, like trying to push, different things, a lot of those big organizations basically become sort of all encompassing. And then it all gets dropped into committees and it all becomes like, oh yes, we should do this, but the conflict's not out in the open. And so you end up with these sort of sabotage things where it's like, oh, we need a committee to decide this or debate this. And like, we should get as many voices as possible, which in itself is not a bad idea. But at a certain point, your committee of like 48 people never finds a day that everyone can ever always meet. And it basically drags on for years and nothing happens. And to be honest, there are some people, I don't know, you could choose any sort of hot topic, like pick like NAGPRA. Like you could definitely see that those sort of things happening a lot in like the big organizations where there's committees to discuss things. And I mean, like that issue dragged on for still drags on for how many decades? I mean, like the law is 30 years old-ish. Yeah. And the conversations that happened decades before that. But that's because, there's a conflict where there are one group of people who don't believe that human remains of certain ethnicities should be excavated or studied or anything along those. And there's another group of people who do. And occasionally you're now sort of seeing this like fight out in the open with those people with news articles on right-wing and left-wing media and, all that sort of stuff. But there's that conflict, but they've tried to keep that internal. Yeah. And you see that with so many organizations where, and it's a part about organizations where they don't like to have split-offs. Like if you look at like WAC, so World Archaeological Congress broke off from, the French one, the Society of some Prehistory, something, whatever, back in the 80s. And WAC is like meant to be very political. It's meant to be the political archaeology organization. And it always cracks me up. Like every other year, someone goes on the WAC listserv and it's like, oh, we should keep our politics out of archaeology. It's like, oh man, you're in the wrong organization for that. But you see this, and it's like they always want to be involved. Like when it becomes a big organization, they're afraid of like things splitting off and them losing power, losing control. And so everything gets brought internally, and you basically have these, I don't know, petty procedural infighting. I don't know, Chris, I'll try to keep my cuss words down because I'm pretty sure I use like a cuss word every time I'm on the podcast. But you guys know what words I'm going to be throwing out there.
Sad, Doug. Sad. And I think many of us in the archaeology world have experienced all this stuff we're talking about in terms of organizations. I think that the big mamas that we've already talked about, be it the AAAs, be it the SAAs, whatever, they're this weirdly like, they don't do like what Chris was saying in the beginning. They don't really do what they're supposed to do anymore. They kind of silo off and there's like, 40 different little branches that are doing their own thing. And then every so often they oddly get some bee up their bonnet and write a strongly worded letter. We're writing a strongly worded letter to about something. But you know what? Nobody cares. It's a hilariously ineffectual thing to do. Well, we will stand up for, I don't know, you know, the rights of this river to flow free. You're like, dude, okay, that's great, but who cares? It's ineffectual. So I think the only way out for groups like this, or for people listening to the podcast, you're like, what should I sign up for? My students always are like, should I sign up for the SAAs? I'm like, no, sign up for the local ones, you know, because the local groups do what Chris was saying. They do what the SAAs did in like 1952. You know, you have, when you are a member of the local ones and you have a meeting, there's only like 30 of you there sometimes at the really small ones. And you really get time. You really come together. You really learn stuff. And I love the little ones. I love the littlest of the little ones. You know, that's really all I go to these days. I get no joy out of the SAAs besides seeing friends and that kind of stuff. But, you know, it's like, why?
I mean, along those lines, though, we've had conversations about conferences and how to make them better before. And I'm still going to say, I do think there is value in joining other people physically, even though I'm a totally virtual kind of guy. And it doesn't necessarily have to be physically. It just has to be a space where you can split off, you can have private conversations, but then you can go and then talk to somebody else and you can bring a group together, that kind of thing. And I'm saying that because it really could be virtual. It could be through VR. It could be through Second Life, for Christ's sake. Everybody can have access to that. I mean, something where you can have those types of interactions, and it doesn't need to be, 1,000 miles away in a $300 a night hotel room, right? It doesn't have to be that. So, because that just puts up a barrier, right? It puts up a barrier to entry for a lot of people. But there is value in some of those conversations if something comes out of it. But you're totally right. Those committees, I mean, I've been in some of those things where, I mean, shit, people are so fired up at the conference, but then like what happens if there's not one person driving it after that, then it literally dies, right? You need somebody who can really manage. It's really project management. And so many archaeologists are so fucking terrible at project management. It's just, we're not trained for it. And we're not, nobody has like I really think project managers and PIs should have a project manager license, to be honest with you, a certification. They should go through that course and learn real project management. And it's sad that we don't. But that being said, nothing ever gets done.
This could sound like high level, like tinfoil cap, like conspiracy level, but part of it is also like power, and like some things are definitely most likely killed, very specifically because, and they do it in a nice way. Again, you throw it out to a committee. If you don't want things to happen, you throw it out to a committee and you let it drag on for years and years until people forget. And like, I honestly, like, again, I think I'm going to go back with Andrew and say, like, and if it's something that you care about, I don't know if it's NAGPRA, either side of the issue, or if we could probably name 500 different issues and stuff like that. Honestly, you should go outside the big organizations. Because, I mean, look at what happened. I like to refer to them as a blessing, but because Blessing's a group of unicorns because they're so rare. But it is the Black Archaeologist Society. Like, if that had been an SAA committee when George Floyd had happened and all that, they still probably would be writing up a statement about like what would happen. And by being a separate organization, suddenly they were so much more effective being a separate organization as opposed to being a somewhat appointed so-and-so's friend. I shouldn't say friend, but like you see this a lot in power structures of those big organizations where it's a lot of the same people getting appointed to different committees to lead to the same things. Some of that is because it's the same people volunteering, but some of that is like you see a lot of how things are structured. They're structured to sort of keep the same status quo. I mean, look at SAA. I'm not, there's going to be a ding on some people, and I know they do a really good job, but them or EAA, they have committees to find people to run for president or, vice president or secretary and stuff like that. And like, you have to be put forward by this committee, which is a huge barrier to being able to like run or change any sort of organization. So if I had a big issue and I wanted to go change the SAA, I would first have to go get nominated or endorsed by the nomination committee and get their approval. Or EAA just changed their rules recently that now you need to get like 10 members endorsements, which is hugely limiting unless, if that limits to a very select sort of people who basically, are always, you have to be a member, and you're like, oh, I know a bunch of archaeologists, but not all of them are members. And it's all the people who are involved will know at least 10 other people who are members and can get nominated and stuff like that. And you see this. Yeah.
I would even say for me, who's like a mid-career archaeologist, full-time job, I know a ton of people. I've been in there a long time. I know a lot of people who are in the SAA. But even for me, if I had to do that, that feels 1,000 miles away. Like it just feels like it's this little sort of effete group of people who just kind of vote for each other in the same little room. And you're right, nothing ever changes. But I will say, I don't think your tin hat thing is a tin hat at all. I think it's about power, like all the time. You even see this in small groups. You got to be honest. Like it's just like we as human beings who are just apes who walk on two legs, we just have these simple thoughts like, me take power, me keep power, you bad because you were like trying to take my power. I don't want to share. And you'll see these, it's almost human nature writ large, So I think it's totally about power lots of the time.
Yeah, for sure. And it gets self-replicating as well.
Yeah.
Like, and so like another note or link we have in the show notes is to this article. And it's actually a really great, like 7-part series about like how shit Sparta was. They're really good at like propaganda, but like, there's one of the articles looks at like their win ratio, which is like 50%. So like Spartans were supposed to be great warriors, and actually it's like, yeah, actually, man, you pretty much just flip a coin and they may win, they may lose. They weren't really that great. In one of the series, he actually looks at like the political system and how it basically concentrates power and eventually leads to like Sparta's demise because they don't have enough soldiers, because they concentrate all the wealth and yada yada. But like reading it, there's a whole description of this side sort of elected body of the people who get to vote and stuff like that. And there's a quote in there where it's just like, it's not actually about voting. It's to give the veneer of voting and really to rubber stamp it so everyone thinks that they have had an input. And I read that and I thought of CIFA, which is the Chartered Institute for Archaeology, because they actually have they have a separate body. So there's a board and then there's a council. And which is made up of like all the little subgroups that they have. And it has, I don't know, 40, potentially 40 some people. And it's this huge group and they do all these meetings and they have they can only make recommendations to the board. They can't vote. They can't make a decision. They can't really push things through. They basically, a huge portion of like a way to get involved in the membership, unless you run for a board, is basically like the vast majority of people actually involved in some sort of quote unquote decision actually have no decision making power anywhere in the entire organization. It's there to sort of give people, the veneer of like, oh, we've had a decision, when really the decision's been made. It's just, it's trying to bring you on board and make you feel like everyone else is on board.
Yeah. Well, hey, with that, let's take our last break and then we'll come back, wrap up this discussion on the other side. Back in a minute.
Save on O'Reilly Brake Parts Cleaner. Get 2 cans of O'Reilly Brake Parts Cleaner for just $8. Valid in-store only at O'Reilly Auto Parts.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Is your vehicle stopping like it should? Does it squeal or grind when you brake? Don't miss out on summer brake deals at O'Reilly Auto Parts.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Save on O'Reilly Brake Parts Cleaner. Get 2 cans of O'Reilly Brake Parts Cleaner for just $8. Valid in-store only at O'Reilly Auto Parts.
O'Reilly Parts.
Welcome back to the CRM Archaeology Podcast, episode 273. And again, we are talking about the garbage dumpster fire that is conferences and archaeological societies and things like that. So let's try to figure out, I mean, where do we go from here, right? And again, we've had this discussion before, but, you know, how do we make, or what would we like to see, you know, in a modern setting, you know, what can these things do? And do they have any place in, like, I think you said, Andrew, in the very beginning was, you know, you see these, you know, lobbying and writing a strongly worded letter to Congress or something like that. The SAA does that all the time, you know, when something comes out, but it literally has no teeth because who are they and what do they do? Right. I mean, sure, they represent a lot of archaeologists, but unlike other institutions that are, say, unions or actual professional societies where people have to join in order to get hired, right? Like apprenticeships and things like that, you know, those types of things, they actually have some power because, you know, you can tell their people to strike and not actually work for anybody, right? And that they'll just grind business to a halt. But archaeology is not like that yet, right? And if it is, if it was, then we'd have a lot more power, but we simply don't. So what can we do?
Yeah, I don't know. You know, I think it's a combination of things. It's obviously kind of a brave new world for a bunch of this stuff, just because technology's gotten so much better. Zoom has gotten so much better in just the last, you know, handful of years. I would sort of just go back to saying for big organizations like the SAAs or something like that. And I don't mean to poo-poo the SAAs too harshly. I'm super glad they're there. You know, I'm happy to be a member, and I always wish them well. But at the same time, you know, there are certain things that are intrinsically funny about what they do. So I would say, in terms of the big meetings, they got to have a larger like online component. They got to have just like a Zoom component or a component where you can just watch the meetings from home. They totally don't do that, right? In terms of kind of gatekeeping it or leaving it so others can't enjoy, you just have to spend all the money to fly to Denver and have a hotel and all that stuff. It is not worth it, you know? So why not have have a much stronger virtual component? But then the local meetings, those can stay, you know, totally local, totally in person, because those are great. The local ones do them perfect. I got no complaints. I'm like, local meetings, just keep doing what you're doing. Those are great. You know, but as you get bigger, I think there is that responsibility to have an online component, because it ultimately could be really healthy for the SAAs. They could get more people into it, you know, if they had this. And I know they could do it. They throw up every single excuse, just like, to go back to what Doug was saying about the, you know, subverting things. It's like the SAA goes, we can't never do it. I think one of the lines in that subversion manual was act stupid. And you know, this computer thing, we can't do this. That's impossible. Right. You know, you're like, stop it. So that's what I would say.
You're not wrong. Yeah. And a comment on the virtual component thing. I don't know how many other industry conferences do this, but I've gone to several podcasting conferences, and I've mentioned it on this show before, but maybe somebody from the SAAs is listening. I've always heard, because we've presented at the SAA before to the SAA leadership many times. The Archaeology Podcast Network has said, hey, can we record some shows officially and then release those? And, you know, even if we just do it for you guys and you release it behind your own paywall there because it's the conference, they've always been reluctant to do that, because they're like, well, then people won't go to the conference and then we lose all our money on this hotel because it's super expensive to pay for the whole thing, which I understand. But that being said, you know, you've got a few thousand people there, and there's probably 3 or 4 times that in the industry that just can't make it or can't go. And part of the reason why there's so many papers concurrently is because the reason people go, the reason they get funding for it, is so they can present. So I would say most of the people that are there are probably presenting, right? So all the ones that want to go and just have discussions with their colleagues and stuff, they either can't go because they can't get the funding for it, or, you know, it's just they got one conference they can pick a year and that's not the one they're going to. So, but the virtual component. So these podcasting conferences, they always sell a virtual ticket, and they have a professional production company back there in each room. And there's not 50 different rooms. That also would cause a problem. I mean, that would cost a lot of money. I understand that, but they've got a professional company. It takes them 2 to 3 weeks to put all the video together, and then it's up on a website. And if you buy the virtual ticket, it's not as expensive as the in-person ticket, but it's pretty damn close because you have access to everything. And if you went, you automatically get the virtual ticket if you actually attended the conference. So, and I mean, if you're having trouble paying for this to get done, I mean, just have a virtual ticket. Doug, you guys have a company that does filming of the presentations and then puts them up. I mean, how do the conferences pay for that? You know what I mean? Is it just they just raise the price for everybody, or I don't understand how they pay for that and then get away with it.
Well, it's not a company; it's a charity, sure. And that's how most of them get away with it. Is because I'm always grateful when people pay, but usually they pay for like travel and accommodation, and that's about it. Mm-hmm. I mean, just go back. The CIFA conference, there was about 200 people online, 200 people in person.
Yeah.
EAA, 600 people online. So it wasn't as even, but it was 600 people and maybe 2,700, 3,000 or something in person.
Yeah.
Or 2,600. I need to remember what it was, but it's a significant amount. This is a whole other podcast about the economics of how those things can work. Yeah, so it is doable, but I also think again this is like internal conflicts of organizations. Like if you had an entirely online conference, then people don't get to be sent to nice places to have little get-togethers.
Yeah.
Or there's a lot of a lot of fear in organizations where I would say they want to be involved in everything, but they want everything to stay the same because it feels comfortable and there's no risk. Yeah. And let's go back to the comments. I know I'm gonna channel my bill on tenure, and just say burn it all down.
Yeah.
But no, like seriously, like I think Andrew had a great point where some of these things you see in small groups. Like everyone, we keep talking about this manual. You guys really, if you're listening to this, you need to go and read it.
It's hilarious.
Yeah, but you'll see this in non-archaeology things. It's like how to sabotage, and it's brilliant. And you see it in a lot of things. I honestly think that if people are truly interested in seeing a change, I don't know, you can pick whatever change you want that to be, whether it be, the adoption of 3-inch trowels over the 5-inch, and that's your thing.
I will die on that hill.
Yes. Whatever hills you want to die on. I think people need to actually we don't give enough tools to people on how to go through the process of making that change. And so everyone then immediately pushes it onto the big organizations. Hey, why aren't you caring about my 3-inch trowel issue? And they get overwhelmed, but also they're like, oh, well, if our members are interested in this, we have to say something. We need to put out a statement about the 3-inch trowel versus the 5-inch and Marshalltown versus WHS. And, this is an issue. We need to look like we're doing something. And that's not the way to go forward. That is a good way to kill whatever initiative you have, is to try to go through a large organization. And that's not to say you can't include them, but you really should find your 3-inch trowel fans, create your own little fandom.
Yeah.
Build something, and then you take it to that organization already handed out and say, you want to sign in on to our 3-inch life for life trowel campaign.
I totally want that t-shirt. I need that t-shirt, dude. But I totally agree. But I would say one other thing, Doug. I think you're totally right on all that stuff, except I would not invite the big organization at the end because they're just going to screw it up. Because you already have your group, you got your 3-inch trowel group, you've made this grassroots organization. It's really cool and people come to it. And because of how modern technology and everything works, you can have your entire association and do great things despite them. They will only come in, with all the stuff we've been talking about, with some big bureaucracy. They're going to tear the heart out of it. So like, I don't think they're largely not needed in that case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's a fear of missing out for people who are like, SAA, $1 million turnover, 2 million, couple of million each year, members fees, conference, all that stuff. They are the only organization that has, multiple members of staff. I mean, SHA, they don't even have any staff, do they? AAA's have staff.
I think that's small.
Do they? SHA now finally has staff?
I want to say yes, but
again, if we're not sure, they probably don't, or they don't have enough resources. But I think it's this idea that like, there's a big organization. If I could just get them on board, they'll bring, these dozen some people, paid staff to make 3-inch trowels a thing in the United States, as opposed to your longer Marshalltown.
Yeah,
but it doesn't work. Like the effort you're going to put into that is not going to see the return you're going to get from that organization in most cases.
Okay, so we need to wrap this up, but I just want to say, I'll bring this back, and I didn't intend this to even talk about this, to be honest, but it just keeps coming up. But those Culturo share events that we're doing, and we're about to have our fourth one. We're having them quarterly. My intent, honestly, my big grand vision for the future is to have them at least monthly, if not more frequently, but they're always focused on a single topic and very few people presenting, right? Like I said, it's more of a data sharing kind of thing, or a knowledge sharing type of event and discussion sort of thing. It's designed to spark discussion, right? And ideas and things like that. But the idea would be eventually to possibly even have in-person events, whether those are virtual or something like that, where you're not just a person in a chat room, you're actually kind of attending somewhat. And whether that, like I said, is virtual in some sort of VR environment or actually in person, just still limiting the number of people, increasing the number of networking events that there are there, right? And the number of workshops. I think workshops, it's a good place to have workshops and learn actually how to do certain things and increase your skill levels. That's a good place to do that, right? Is places like that. So I don't know. That's what I would focus on. I don't know if I'd ever get to that point with the Culturo share stuff, just because I'm very opposed to the in-person thing, the in-person physically thing, not the in-person virtual thing. But we'll see. I don't know. So, all right. Final thoughts.
I'd say watch out, Chris, because like if you become successful, you're gonna rile feathers, and
sure. I don't care. I'll be dead soon. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, anyone else listening who's not planning on dying in the next 12 months?
Oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I would say definitely. I've said go out and build your own thing, but just be aware that building your own thing, you're gonna have. And this is the thing about big organizations. You see this with companies as well. I don't know how many companies now have an AI division / head of technical whatever that suddenly existed in the last month. And then going before that, how many had what were those little virtual things? It sounded like cryptocurrency. And then going before that, now all the media companies have streaming services, even though they lose a ton of money and yada yada. But basically, if people see success, there's a fear of missing out, and they will jump in. And just be aware, you may leave. And again, I'm with Andrew on this. I don't want to sound unfair to SAA or any of the other organizations out there, but they may come for you and crush you later. But that's life. Yeah. And again, I'm with Andrew. Organizations are organizations made of people. They try their best, and it's not. We're just talking about them because they're the biggest, and we're sort of beat up on them. But that's nothing personal against the SAA. If you're listening,
I know.
Yeah.
No, I would agree. And I would agree with you, Doug. I would just say that, I mean, again, it's never been a better time to sort of do your own thing. I mean, here we are on the Archaeological Podcast Network. You know, Chris, you may have a feeling for this, you know, doing your own thing outside. This has nothing to do with the SAA. How's the SAA's podcast network these days? Oh, right. There isn't one. Exactly. You know, I'm sure there's still somewhere in committee. So, you know, good for us. And also, I will say I'm not a fan of sort of the idea of burning anything down or whatever. I don't like when people say that. Mm-hmm. I'm like, no, they do their own thing and that's great. You know, and I wish them well. But the idea of if they come for us, bring them on. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, what are they going to do? Again, I guess another strongly worded letter is on the way to us. So what?
I'm sure of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, with that, I think we'll call it. So, yeah, if anybody from one of the big organizations is listening to this podcast and you would like to have a podcast maybe on the APN or maybe just the APN can help you put it together, I'm shocked that none of the big societies or organizations have a podcast that I'm aware of, right? I mean, I'm actually shocked by that. Even just to interview the people who are in your journals, right? Like you could have a corresponding podcast where you expand the conversation beyond the journal articles. I've wanted to do that before, but I'm not going to do it for you. You know what I mean? Right. So it's just, I don't understand all that. So
you should charge them, Chris. Do it for them and charge them for it.
I would, but none of them want to pay for it. I've definitely approached some of them before about that idea, and it just falls on deaf ears because they don't see the value. So, you know, that's we don't have the right people in place in those organizations that do see the value in that, which is unfortunate.
No, you do. It's just that when they raise that up, you know, they raise it up and it's a committee of 12 and 3 people see the value. And this is why you don't have small committees, Chris, is you got to make sure that nothing happens without the control. And exactly. Dead serious. This is like you will, any organization you go to, there's going to be people on whatever board or whatever committee that will be like, yeah, a podcast, man. Definitely. The problem is there's only 3 of them and 18 people show up to the meetings and always are going to get outvoted.
All right. Well, with that, we'll end this show and we'll be back with whatever is on Archaeo Field Text next week. So thanks a lot. Bye.
I thought that was the outro. You said goodbye already, Chris. You said goodbye. No. You're dugging us right here. You said goodbye before the outro.
That's it for another episode of the CRM Archaeology Podcast. Links to some of the items mentioned on the show are in the show notes for this podcast, which can be found at www.arcpodnet.com/CRMArcPodcast. Please comment and share anywhere you see the show. If you'd like us to answer a question on a future episode, email us. Use the contact form on the website, or just email chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com. Support the show and the network at arcpodnet.com/members. Get some swag and extra content while you're there. Send us show suggestions and interview suggestions. We want this to be a resource for field technicians everywhere, and we want to know what you want to know about. Thanks to everyone for joining me this week. Thanks also to the listeners for tuning in, and we'll see you in the field.
See you guys next time.
Hey, hold on, guys. I think we're rushing to conclusions before we end this podcast. I think we should go by the book. We should go through official channels before we end this. I would recommend that we probably need to set up a committee to decide on ending this. I only see 3 of us here, so obviously we need Bill, we need Heather.
There's no quorum.
We should get Tristan.
Robert's rules.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Chris. We can't end this.
That's true.
Yeah, you haven't followed Robert's rules.
I didn't realize that. That's correct.
I'm hitting the stop button because we're following Chris's rules.
No. I can't say goodbye. I refuse to say goodbye until we follow the rules. Until we follow the rules. No, you can't.
This episode was produced by Chris Webster from his RV traveling the United States, Tristan Boyle in Scotland, DigTech LLC, Cultural Media, and the Archaeology Podcast Network, and was edited by Chris Webster.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.arcpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.